New housing data has just been released, and the results have been, let's just say, shocking, as it's been eerily similar to what we saw in 2007. And we all know what happened in 2008. So, is 2025 potentially similar to what we saw in 2007? All right, I know it. Let's back it up a second. Let's dive into the data. Show me the data. Show me the numbers. Let's see what we've got here. Well, we've got investor home purchases declining nationwide, even though we have interest rates coming on down. So it's interesting that we're seeing, even though homes are theoretically getting cheaper, we are seeing now housing drop specifically and dropping significantly in areas of Florida. Investor activity is declining nationwide due to slow home buying demand, a lackluster rental market, economic uncertainty, and of elevated interest rates. The market share is falling. They bought 17% of homes sold in the fourth quarter, down from 19% last year. Investors are pulling back fastest, with purchases down 28%. Good Lord. 28% in Orlando and down 21% in Miami. Condos also falling 13%. Look, I don't think condos are a great real estate investment, just strictly because we do have some HOAs and other things like that. But let's keep on diving in to the data, because the homes sold above listing price have dropped. So that means people aren't able to value their homes, and they're getting less than they expect. So they're declining pretty quickly here. And let's face it, majority of Americans who have their own single home have majority of their wealth in their home. So previously we saw homes skyrocket in flight, absolutely take off from 2020 to 2022. And then we had somewhat of a little bit of a lull there, as you can see here, and by the housing price index. We had a really big lull after 22, like mid 22 to 23, where everything went somewhat flat. And then now it seems like we're maybe going to go flat and potentially fall down, because homes are now being sold by less than their overall listing price, right? So they're not looking to continue to rise. And with that, people who have majority of their wealth in their homes, which is majority of Americans who own homes, now seeing that down. They're seeing homes with price drops to nearly 20%, which is 5% greater than it was this time last year. 5%. So we're seeing that shoot up like crazy. And the sale list to list price is now down under 100%. So the demand just simply is not really there. And we're starting to see that. So there's differing opinions, but everybody is talking about the potential of this housing market crash. Will we see one? Will we not? I, for one, think that there's a lot of signs. We've seen a major asset bubble. We've seen places like Austin, where I grew up, and other cities in Florida. We've got Orlando and Miami, which I cited earlier. I'm here, sitting here, coming to you live from Tampa, Florida. We've seen housing prices drop here. But the media, the traditional media, Forbes, for example, is saying, whoa, 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 hold your horses here. Even though we've got record home prices still trending upwards in many markets, you may be concerned we're in a bubble and it's primed to pop, as it did in 2008 financial crisis. However, the likelihood of a housing market crash, a rapid drop in unsustainably high home prices due to warning demand, remains low, allegedly, right? So they're thinking that it's not looking likely that that is the case here. But what else are we seeing, right? Let's look at the trends of income and wealth inequality, because I think the overall macro environment is extremely important to understand. Many of you guys here in the chat, I see here from my Bitcoin channel. But what we're seeing in the overall macro economy is also something unique, right? We're seeing in the past 10 years, the end of the Great Recession in 2009, the economy is doing well on several fronts. And this is from 2020, right? This is foreshadowing here. Household incomes are growing again after a lengthy period of stagnation. And this was in 2020, right? So everything was trending up and whatnot there. But I mean, I listened to this great podcast. It was recommended by a friend of the program, George Gammon. But look at all of these. The forecast price growth margin here from March 2025 to 26. We got DC, of course, people flooding out of DC. We've got Florida dropping by 5%, Texas dropping by 4%, Arizona, Colorado, Utah, Tennessee, all the places that we saw with massive amounts of increases in home prices from 2020, where everybody was flocking down during, that virus that got sent over from China. Everybody is now flocking somewhere else. Of course, DC, right? Everybody is now moving out of there because of, who we've got in office. It's always kind of funny. You see that the trend's kind of going there, right? So we've got now many different markets, right? Obviously, we can look at something like Bozeman, Montana, right? This was one of the first things that came up when I said look at specific markets. For some reason, Bozeman, Montana came up. I think it's because of this great website that they've got here, right? So look at this. Look at what they're showing here. Is it a neutral market? It's about a neutral market. It's not a seller's. It's not a buyer's market. It's slightly above that, looking towards more of a seller's market. But look at how much the homes have cost in Bozeman, Montana. $761,000, up 4% year over year. So Bozeman, Montana, not feeling the heat. But what are we seeing with others? Atlanta. Atlanta is one of the biggest metropolitan areas in the world, right? It's got one of the largest airports, a lot of money, Delta, TBS, a lot of big, giant, major corporations have their hubs in Atlanta. So wouldn't you think we would see Atlanta's houses always skyrocket up? Well, not so fast, my friend. We're seeing medium home prices drop by over 10%. The number of homes drop by 8%. The only thing that is changing in a positive direction is median days on the market, which that means nothing is moving here, right? That means houses are not moving and it's staying on the market. And once it stays on the market, it's generally, like as I showed you guys a little bit earlier, when it stays on the market, what are we seeing here? Prices drop, right? So we're seeing 20% of homes with prices drop. So over time, we're starting to continue to see that. We've even got other experts, Barbara Corcoran, who's got a massive portfolio of homes. She's saying that makes a bold prediction that the housing market's biggest problem is that home buyers have faced stagnant housing market riddled with high prices and low inventory. Mortgage rates doubled when inflation surged in 2022, skyrocketing in flight. Home prices have locked in many would-be buyers out of the market. Then when the Fed began cutting interest rates, most forecasters predicted the rates would fall below 6%. However, we haven't even seen that yet, right? We haven't seen that. There's been bold takes out here where there's a lot of uncertainty in the housing market, and there's not a lot of confidence in there, right? So an impending economic recession could make matters worse for the already sluggish housing markets. In 2024, housing sales reached record lows not seen since 1995. So even when the housing market crashed in 2008, 2009, we still didn't see the amount of housing stop and slow down that we've seen since 95. I mean, my God, I was just a young wee lad at that time. So recessions do not typically lower mortgage rates. Yeah. After seeking safe return, they flock to the 10-year treasury. Yeah. Boring investment there, right? But look at the economic trends that we've got. The weekly chemistry and economic trends. What do we got going on here? Housing down 11%. My God. And that's just from this week. I mean, like looking at all of these numbers, you're seeing massive amounts and double digit drops in housing that we've honestly never seen before. Like it's incredible the amount of volatility that we're seeing in the housing market and in markets all over. We typically do not see. I've discussed this in previous live streams on this channel about the stock market. I mean, I've been discussing with people and they're saying the S&P 500, when it does not return 20%, they are upset. When, just 6-7 years ago, the S&P 500 was expected to return 8 to 12%. So we're seeing all of this basically unravel the current markets because of the massive amounts of money printing. And it's making a lot of volatility come with all these different types of markets. So multiple reports are showing that home values have flattened as sellers outnumber the buyers. And that's going to continue because the economic state, a lot of people are very worried about what we've got going on here. And we've got one of the most active chats I've had on this channel. So I really appreciate the love. All you guys coming all over. The GOAT All-Nighter Hider said his plan is to have REI to buy more BTC. Look, the reason I like real estate is, one, you always need a head over or a roof over your head to live, right? So I don't think that your own specific house is a good investment. Maybe I'll make a video about that at some point in time. But I think if the numbers work, you get great tax benefits and you could get a little bit of cash flow in. And I also think there's an angle here for some Bitcoin mining. And maybe that is another video idea as well, because as McLovin in the chat is saying, people call Bitcoin a speculative asset, but look at real estate. Look, I mean, I'm showing it. They're dropping like flies. The amount is fallen. George is the buddy. Will you be going to the Rubber Capitals live? Unfortunately, I won't be making it out this year, but I hope to make it out in the future. I just need to maybe you guys comment on George's stuff and tell him to invite me out or something. I don't know. He always goes with Josh and some of the other great guys, but unfortunately, I haven't gotten the invite just yet. I'm not that close with George just yet, but I have met him and he's a great guy. I've learned a ton from him, so he's great. Housing has many different sectors: single, multifamily, and move up, luxury and move up, and entry level. Exactly. That's the unique thing with all of this. So I appreciate you guys coming in here. One's personal home is not the best piggy bank for sure. I agree. What a lot of my friends who have now gotten into the homes, I've realized owning a home isn't the greatest thing because of how much now, like the wood cost, some of the renovation expenses, a lot of these things just get more and more expensive over time. And so I think a lot of people who jumped into homes in 2020 were like, oh my God, this is so easy, right? We're seeing our home prices double. And they didn't realize that the underlying currency was the reason. It's not that the land in Tampa, is getting more valuable or wherever it is. I think a lot of people are looking at this and realizing like, hey, home price growth and inventory swelled what's typically to the most competitive home shopping months of the year. That's despite mortgage rates reaching a 2025 low. Sellers made a strong showing in March, putting more than almost 400,000 homes on the market, an increase of 9% compared to the same time last year, while new listing activity is still about 19% below typical March before the pandemic. It's steadily rising month over month and tracking closely with normal seasonal trends. So, I mean, it is tracking seasonal trends, but, we've got California, Southern California price growth is slowing. Whose market is it now? I mean, like all of these things, right? We're seeing people talk about specific markets and everybody says, okay, real estate, you have to know the specific area, the specific market. And obviously this is a video that is more about the generalities. But if we're looking at just all the signs everywhere, we got Atlanta, we got the big cities, we got Southern California's price slowing. We've got economists and real estate started a variety of factors contributing to the trend, including high mortgage rates, rising inventory, and the economic uncertainty caused in part by on-again, off-again tariffs. So the beauty of real estate is that things move very slow, but this is also why maybe people have become very tentative about it. So we're seeing this start to slow down, the potential of people getting worried about another economic slowdown, and housing being one of the biggest drivers of personal wealth in the United States. So the GOAT is over here. So he'll tell you, smoke the like Cheech and Chong. Hit the subscribe button with the bell notification because I'm going to be bringing you guys more and more live streams from this channel. Cooperative assets are much better than assets at odd unless you need to hedge Bitcoin. Anyone? Hey, I agree with you. Those are always, you could be your own bank. There is some issues with real estate, but the one thing I do love about real estate is the tax benefits. Always something that needs to be repaired. Amen. Oh man, yeah, these things are not cheap for sure. Yeah, text Josh about getting me into the Rebel Capitalist Live, please. Says I'm in a blessed position of being a contractor. Investing contractor can be powerful pair coupled with financial education. There we go, man. I love to hear it. All nighter hider. Entrepreneurs, they're the best. But anyway, let's get back into this because what we're seeing is housing prices start to slow. Everybody start to worry about the potential of a housing crash. So we're going to be tracking this very closely in other economic data because there's a lot of uncertainty in the market. So if you guys love that, then, before I close it on out, we got McLevin saying, what kind of investment property has the lowest liabilities and risks in general? I imagine probably doing some sort of syndication onto a large apartment building where you essentially have just like a small percentage. You don't have to run it, essentially like plug and play, right? You get the tax advantages of real estate, or you could even buy a stock market REIT, right? Where it's similar to a syndication. I have rental properties, but of course, those liabilities run directly on me, right? The insurance, the single family, the duplex, but the cash flow on multifamilies, honestly, is so leaps and bounds better. And that's why, everybody tries to get in on those. It is a little bit harder to get. Digital property is immune to all of this. Amen. It is. That is very true. True words have never been spoken there, all-nighter hider. But smoke the like Cheech and Chong. Hit the subscribe button. Tell a friend to tell a friend. Thank you, all 7 of you guys, for joining here on this small channel because we are going to be ramping this thing up. So be prepared for more economic breakdowns. So come and join me later on and hit that bell notification. Thank you guys all for jumping in.